Hello and welcome to your Newsmax Daily for Wednesday, September 4th, 2024, the first of 4 Wednesdays this month, the 248th day of the year, and it's National Wildlife Day, created to highlight endangered animals and the ongoing efforts to conserve them. And National Wildlife Day is so important, it's actually celebrated twice annually, today and again in February. On the food calendar, it's National Macadamia Nut Day. Who doesn't love some good nuts? Which is interesting because most macadamias come from other countries, with the exception of Hawaii and California. In the headlines, 2 Phoenix police officers were shot in the line of duty last night while responding to reports of a vehicle break-in. This man witnessed it.
We had just seen a cop yell, cop down, and then he's putting CPR on them.
In a news conference late last night, the Phoenix police chief said one officer is in critical condition, the other is in stable condition, saved by his ballistic vest. In Washington, the House Foreign Affairs Committee has subpoenaed Secretary of State Antony Blinken over the Biden administration's chaotic and deadly pullout of Afghanistan, saying Blinken has refused to appear before the panel to testify. In a letter, committee chair Texas Rep. Michael McCall said Blinken must appear before the committee on September 19th or face contempt charges. And the Department of Justice has subpoenaed AI company NVIDIA as part of its antitrust investigation into whether the company's huge success hurt buyers who wanted to use other providers. The stock took a big hit yesterday. Now, I suggest that some committee should also investigate whether Nancy Pelosi, her husband, or Chuck Schumer's wife, sold shares of NVIDIA back on Friday before the DOJ subpoena. And after participating in 2 events for 2 consecutive days, President Biden has no scheduled events on the White House calendar today. But there will be another White House briefing this afternoon. And in case you missed yesterday's briefing,
a different topic. Since when does the vice president have what sounds like a southern accent?
Better thank a union member for sick leave. You better thank a union member for paid leave. And you all helped us win in 2020, and we're going to do it again in 2024.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well,
I mean, this is...
She was talking about unions in Detroit using one tone of voice.
Is this something that you think...
Same line...
Okay, Peter.
That she used the same line in Pittsburgh, and it sounded like she at least had some kind of a southern drawl.
I mean, do you hear the question that you're... I mean, do you think Americans seriously think that this is an important question? They care... You know what they care about? They care about the economy. They care about lowering costs. They care about health care. That's what Americans care about.
Okay, so when is she going to start talking about those things, with or without any fake accent? Political advisor Mark Lotter and former White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley on Wake Up America.
Mark, what do you make of that? Why is she doing that?
Well, I think it's the campaign in itself. She's whatever you want her to be. She's whatever she is on policy is who she's talking to. It's the fake accents. It's the fake concern. It's literally just a fake campaign because she stands for nothing. She's trying to hide what she actually is. And so she'll just portray herself to be anything she can be to get your vote, fool you later.
Yeah, Hogan, she's like a campaign chameleon, and she's done this before. She rallied in July in Atlanta, and remember, she put on the accent very heavy on stage there as well. And I think she continues to do this because, again, no one's calling her out on it. We are, of course, but the other media is not calling her out on it. Do voters see this? And namely voters in these very important battleground states. Do they see that she is, as Mark said, whatever they want her to be and whatever she wants to be?
Well, she's a fake and she's a phony, and she puts on fake accents, as Mark said. She uses fake policy, whatever she needs to do to try and get you doing here. Why is she trying to pander so hard to certain audiences? And I remember a few years back, I'll dig it up and send it to you guys in the break, but there was a study by Yale, by Yale actually, where it showed Democrat politicians have an overwhelming tendency to change their speech and to change their cadence depending on the crowd they're in front of, especially when it's an African-American crowd. You saw that with Hillary Clinton. You see that with Barack Obama. You see that with Kamala Harris as well. So it just shows you more and more how fake and phony she is, how horrible this campaign is. And the more they try to hide her the more people kind of get to see exactly how bad she is, because clips like that come out and you realize this whole campaign is built on lies.
Well, I think it also shows a really insecure woman who's almost 60 years old, which is very bizarre to me. If you're a confident politician and you're confident in the body of work that you've built up over the course of a career, you get out there, you deliver a speech, even if it's an African-American crowd, say in Detroit. I'm not sure that it was. It looked like a mixed crowd to me. You deliver that speech, and then, by the way, she's got speechwriters. Like, can you get a new speech? 3 hours later, she delivers the exact same crowd in Western Pennsylvania, and she changes the way that she's pronouncing words completely. It's just, that's a really weak, insecure, sad person, particularly someone that's 60 years old. This is a high schooler, or somebody that's young and inexperienced. Maybe you get that, somebody that's green. That's not the case with the sitting vice president.
Rob Finnerty, co-host of Wake Up America with Hogan Gidley, and Mark Lauder, chief communications officer at America First Policy Institute. The one thing the vice president is talking about are a lot of the old Donald Trump false stories created by Democrats over the years. This is Chris Plante, host of The Right Squad.
It was 4 short years ago, I'm sure you remember, The Atlantic published an article alleging that President Trump refused to visit an American cemetery in France because it was filled with losers and called fallen American Marines suckers. That was the news story in The Atlantic. Today, Kamala Harris commemorated the fake story and the anniversary of that fake story in Atlantic Magazine on her campaign's X page. It's an X page now. And the Trump campaign immediately responded with, laid waste to Kamala's claims, saying that the story was not true and that Trump's scheduled visit to the ceremonies was called off due to weather, you may recall. The campaign quoted 14 officials who were actually on the 2018 France trip with then President Trump, like former National Security Advisor John Bolton, who is no cheerleader for President Trump these days, who said, "I was there at the point in time that morning when it was decided that he would not go to the Marne Cemetery. He decided not to do it because of John Kelly, Chief of Staff and General John Kelly's recommendation. It was entirely a weather-related decision, and I thought the proper thing to do," John Bolton said. Now, this is you may remember this event, and it's
I was in the White House during this time, so yes.
And still being used, trotted out by the Democrats.
Well, this is the falsehood that keeps coming out of Kamala Harris. I mean, everything that she has talked about in terms of so many things that she's talked about Donald Trump is just one, lie after another. And the problem is that you don't have the legacy media basically doing necessarily the fact checking on Kamala Harris. Instead, you have them always just focus on criticizing and, destroying Donald Trump.
And Jason, I know this is a favorite talking point of the Democrat Party, this whole France cemetery thing and what Trump allegedly said. And again, the campaign put out, John Bolton is not a cheerleader for President Trump anymore. And he's out there saying that's a lot of hooey. It was weather. The Marines said the helicopters couldn't fly safely, and that was that.
Now, whether he said the words suckers and losers referring to members who lost their lives in the military, I think it's consistent with what he said publicly, particularly about John McCain and people who were prisoners of war. So I think that's why a lot of people believe it. Also, General Kelly confirmed that he actually said those words.
General Kelly hates Donald Trump.
The other thing,
okay,
I would say,
I'm sorry, he hated Donald Trump.
Jeffrey Goldberg, the guy who wrote that article that we just referenced, said he had several sources within the White House who said that the former president spoke that way.
Well, there are people
that
that don't like Donald Trump, that are in the White House, that are part of the national security team, that have been there. They're not, their careers are not political. Let me tell you, there was a lot of people trying to dismantle and undermine President Trump, as we saw many of these leaks that came out of the National Security Office when it came to phone calls with foreign leaders, which you should never allow those types of leaks to go out. And that was always these people that were always trying to undermine President Trump. That came from the State Department, and it came from the National Security Team.
That's former White House Director of Strategic Communications, Mercedes Schlapp, and Democrat political analyst Jason Nichols, both members of the Right Squad, weeknights at 10 o'clock Eastern on Newsmax. And right before that, Greg Kelly returned from his Labor Day break and had plenty to say.
This is it. It's happening. It always felt like it was so far away. Early voting starts basically the day after tomorrow. Wow, post-Labor Day, here we are, and everything is on the line. Quick recap, Donald Trump has been at this for 2 years. 2 years, almost. This is how you campaign for president when you're serious. When you're not, when you're trying to pull a fast one on the American people, you show your face for about 3 months. 3 months and pray and hope and lie, cheat, and steal probably to pull this thing off. 3 months. This is totally un-American, totally anti-democratic. We all know that. Even Joe Biden had the decency to announce for president, what, a year and 7 months, okay? Yes, he lied every step of the way, but he did officially declare. Same goes for Hillary, right? She waged a campaign, all right? Is that too much to ask? Obama was at it for almost 2 years, too. I mean, this is a long time. But Kamala, only 3 months. And we know why now, right? I mean, there's no possible way with the reasonable scrutiny that a presidential candidate can expect to undergo would she pass muster with the American people, with the people of Luxembourg, the tiniest country you can find. I don't know what that is. Andorra, it's a little colony between France and Spain. Nobody, no, can't happen. It just can't unless they pull this kind of stuff. Hey, one other thing that I didn't notice during the big interview last week. So she sits down and, the initial question, I'm just kind of taking it all in. Wow, she's really, what does she look like? What's going on? You're adjusting. I missed this part. Now, the first question was an easy one, actually.
The voters are really eager to hear what your plans are. If you are elected, what would you do on day one in the White House?
In the White House, if you run for president for a year and a half, you get pretty good at answering that question. You get asked it all the time. She's only been at this for a little while, and this is the only time she's actually been getting a question. This might be the very first time she heard the question, so she had no idea what to do or say. So the first thing you do is, well, kill time. Just say stuff and fill the time.
I will tell you, first and foremost, one of my highest priorities is to do what we can to support and strengthen the middle class. When I look at the aspirations, the goals, the ambitions of the American people.
You see this part? Well, I'm going to try to, Aspirations, goals, and ambitions. Aspirations, goals, and ambitions. 3 words that say the same thing. This is probably the first time again she got this question. She doesn't know what to do. So, what's her name? Dana Bash circles back and tries again.
So what would you do day one?
What would you day one? All right, so she goes back to the aspirations, goals, hooking up the middle class, blah, 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 nothing. And then she says one little specific, and it's more significant than I first thought.
What we're going to do to bring down the cost of everyday goods, what we're going to do to invest in America's small businesses, what we're going to do to invest in families, for example, extending the child tax credit to $6,000 for families for the first year of their child's life to help them buy a car seat, to help them buy baby clothes, a crib.
Who says she doesn't talk specifics right there? A baby clothes, a blanket, a car seat. What was that? Baby clothes, a crib, and a car seat. This is the specific. This is the first day one. This is what she's going to do. This is it. You could talk to 1 million people. 1 million. You could ask 1 million people in America what is their prior. Nobody is going to say they expect this stuff from a president. Nobody. The border. Yeah, you may have 60 to 70% talking about that. She doesn't want to talk about it. She wants to talk about the car seat, the baby blanket, and the what else again? The crib? I mean, what about crime? I think a lot of people are worried about crime. Yes, indeed. No, let's talk about the car seat, the baby blanket, and the stuff. Wow. And they say that she could actually win this race. No, she can't. She can't get by the American people. No, right? Please.
Greg Kelly is the host of Greg Kelly Reports, weeknights at 9 on Newsmax. And while the vice president, the border czar, the current vice president and current border czar, continues to ignore the border and crime, illegal migrants are running wild in Colorado and other places. Bob Brooks, co-host of American Agenda, breaks it down.
Let's talk more about this Venezuelan gang violence in Aurora, Colorado. If you haven't heard, a Venezuelan gang, according to the mayor of Aurora, Mike Kaufman, has seized control over several apartment complexes. You may or may not have seen this video that brought it to national attention. Luckily, it has. It shows men walking into an apartment complex, heavily armed. You can see them. They are literally just walking around with what looks like semi-automatic guns in their hands through the building. Just great, right? I'm sure that is the America you all envision us living in. But this is what happens since Biden and Harris took 89 executive actions to dismantle Trump's border policies in their first year. That's what they did. So just to sort through some of these details here, there's some debate between the mayor and what the police department in Aurora is putting out. The mayor is saying on record, point blank, areas of the city have been taken over by the gangs. And then you have the interim chief of police, Heather Morris, saying this. We've been talking to the residents here and learning from them to find out what is exactly going on, and there's definitely a different picture. I'm not saying that there's not gang members that don't live in this community, but what we're learning here is that the gang members have not taken over this apartment complex, said Chief Morris. So do we really think that the people who are living in these apartment complexes whose lives are being threatened by this, these men walking around the building with guns in their hands, do you think they're going to tell police, hey, yeah, they took us over, I'll rat them out? They're going to be killed if they say anything. That's how gangs operate. And here's the real thing. Aurora didn't even want this problem in the first place. So if you think your town is immune to this, you are wrong. Obviously, no city wants this, but the mayor says they took steps to try and avoid this very thing from happening. They wanted nothing to do with this. Here's Kaufman on the local news in Denver.
The city of Aurora took a position early on that we were not going to participate in the migrant crisis. We were not going to provide taxpayer support, and we were not even going to be a conduit for federal dollars to come in to provide assistance. This is not our problem. This is a problem created by the federal government at the border with bad policy. And so it's the federal government that needs to solve this problem, not the city of Aurora.
They couldn't stop it. How can you? Denver, which Aurora is a suburb of, is a hotbed for migrants. And here's what they get when you arrive to Denver. Quote, 6 months of housing assistance, in-depth workforce training, and food assistance while they await legal work authorization. That, to me, sounds like an open invitation. In fact, the mayor says he doesn't even know how these people showed up in his city. Someone somehow appears to have deliberately put them there.
I believe that these people just didn't go there on their own. I think somebody put them there, and I'm trying to find out right now.
I've also said on this program time and time again, if you think that illegal migrants are going to just stay inside of these sanctuary cities, you're crazy. And Aurora is just an example of that very thing. The Venezuelan gangs have now made their way into the suburbs. So what's next? Your quaint little small town? Probably. That's probably what's going to happen. That's how this works.
That's Newsmax host Bob Brooks. The other big story on the world stage that we cannot ignore is the Israel-Hamas war, right? As protests and demonstrations continue in the streets of Israel following the weekend murders of 6 hostages. Let's go back to yesterday's White House briefing for a moment.
The heinous acts that we have seen by Hamas is devastating. And those 6 hostages, their families are grieving. The president was very clear about that in his statement over the weekend, and he's going to continue to work around the clock.
Okay. Does anybody believe that? Karine Jean Pierre. She's doing the Biden thing now where you say it twice so it really means it. Around the clock. This is Greta Van Susteren, who, remember, a few months ago went to Israel and Gaza, actually went in the Hamas tunnels.
Former spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Force and senior fellow for the Foundation for Defense and Democracy, Jonathan Conricus, joins me. Good evening, sir. And, I don't think anyone is bothered to read the Hamas charter. I mean, it's just like, and to see what they've done, it's almost like the Biden administration, everybody else, we'd love a ceasefire, but how naive, because Hamas doesn't want one. They get a ceasefire and suddenly the world stops hating Israel.
Yes, good evening, Greta. I'm happy that you and your staff have done the correct journalistic thing and to actually go through that horrible document that is the founding document of Hamas, and it really tells you all you need to know. Hamas wants to destroy Israel. They write it in their documents. They say it in Arabic and in English to those willing to listen, and they do it in actions. And what they say also after October the 7th is that they will do massacre after massacre, and they won't stop until all of the Jews are gone from what I call Israel and for what they call Palestine. That's clear. It's clear for many Israelis. It's clear for the IDF, and that is why Israelis say ceasefire all the time that Hamas is still in power and intact equals a victory for Hamas, and it equals a victory of the massacre of October 7th. And it's something that we cannot tolerate.
All right, let me ask you one last question, because there are two ways to get weapons into Gaza for Hamas, either the Mediterranean or through the southern border, which is the Philadelphia corridor that Egypt has supposedly been in charge of to monitor so they couldn't dig tunnels and bring all these weapons in. And now Egypt is part of the discussion. Is Egypt taking any responsibility? They were supposed to patrol this area so all these weapons didn't get in there, and it didn't happen that way.
Not only are they not taking responsibility, but many officers in the Egyptian military forces have gotten rich out of kickbacks from smugglers. And even worse, today, the Egyptians are the main force standing between Israel, making sure that there are no tunnels, and stopping Hamas. The Egyptians have been opposing vehemently any efforts by Israel to control that Philadelphia corridor and make sure that there are no tunnels. And Egypt has been applying pressure on the U.S., and that has been applied on Israel. And unfortunately, that is why things are stalling. But Egypt has so much to lose from closing those tunnels. A lot of kickbacks and a lot of money has gone through Egypt because of those tunnels.
And I'm going to take the last word on this, but Hamas is an offshoot of Muslim Brotherhood, which, of course, is Egypt. So, it's very easy for me to be very suspicious that everybody's up to his eyeballs in this. Anyway, Jonathan Conricus, thank you for joining me, sir.
Thank you for having me, ma'am.
Jonathan Conricus is the former spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces, on the record with Greta Van Susteren. Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, everyone else that he mentioned as having some connection and shady connection and making money has been involved in the futile ceasefire discussions with the United States. Don't forget, Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been there now, 8 or 9 times for ceasefire discussions. The Hamas covenant that Greta mentioned at the beginning is available online. She said, I can't believe that everybody hasn't gone to read this yet. If you do some poking around, you'll see it, and it's clear a ceasefire isn't going to happen. And while the Vice President really hasn't acknowledged it, her husband, Doug Emhoff, the second gentleman, spoke at a vigil at his synagogue in Washington, D.C. yesterday, saying he hasn't been able to stop thinking about Hirsch, the Israeli American that was killed, his parents, and the 5 other families. He also added, I feel raw and I'm gutted. Second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, who is Jewish, and it's nice to have him at least speaking out about it. Meanwhile, Brazil has banned the free speech social media platform X. Both Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate, Governor Walz, don't seem to have any problem with it.
All right, folks, we spoke a little bit about this yesterday. The Brazil Supreme Court, Brazilian, I don't know, upheld a ban on Elon Musk's X platform because he refused to bend the knee to the censorship, what they called hate speech or misinformation. They didn't just come for him, though. They cracked down on the people, telling anybody that uses the platform, even by VPN, that they will be fined almost $9,000 a day, U.S. equivalent. I mean, if Kamala wins, it's only a matter of time before it happens, too. She said it out loud.
There has to be a responsibility that is placed on these social media sites to understand their power. They are directly speaking to millions and millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation.
FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr has been super vocal about it. Elon Musk even retweeting you, sir. This is crazy, but it's not far-fetched in America either.
Yeah, what we're seeing in Brazil right now is sort of the tip of the iceberg. They're doing expressly what is taking place just below the surface in countries all across the globe. It's very concerning. You know, some of the headlines would suggest that this was a dispute about a registered agent in Brazil. It's nothing like that. I've read through the full 51-page decision of the justice in Brazil, and he says expressly that he wants to ban X because he's worried that free speech available to the people in Brazil will influence how they will vote in Brazil's upcoming election. He gave expressly,
that's the point.
Yeah, he pointed expressly to Brexit in 2016 and to President Trump's election here in 2016 as examples of populist outcomes, indicating that he wanted to avoid. This violates Brazil's constitution. There are government officials in Brazil that are standing up against this. They don't necessarily need to reflect the same free speech rights we have in America, but you can't violate Brazilian law and take that out on retribution on companies that are ultimately tied back to the U.S.
Right. Well, you know what's crazy is the countries and even Democrats here in America, they're using the notion of, we're just here to censor misinformation, but they try to censor speech, you know, for everything under that guise. RFK tweeted, medical science experts from Harvard have said it perfectly. Roll this.
The greatest perpetrator of misinformation during the pandemic has been the United States government.
But there's no consequences, and yet they still keep taking down our speech.
Yeah, I mean, just last week, Mark Zuckerberg came forward and said that he was pressured by the Biden-Harris administration to censor Americans, and that should be deeply concerning. You know, we need some accountability there, but at least in the short term, you know, Facebook and other social media sites should publicly disclose between now and the election if any government officials, right, left, center, pressures them to censor America's posts. If they don't feel like they can publicly disclose it, then they should go to Congress and immediately disclose on a bipartisan basis that pressure that's taking place. You know, free speech is so important, but it's really on the knife edge right now. We are seeing, to your point, an effort to adopt censorship, to put it in the rubric of disinformation or misinformation. But it's concerning. You know, free speech is democracy's check on authoritarianism. And unfortunately, this is a live debate right now.
FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr on Frontline with Carl Higbee. And go back to what Carl said at the beginning. Not only did Brazil ban X, well, the U.S. wanted to ban TikTok, right? Okay, but Carl said Brazilians using X, even if they're using it through a VPN, could be fined up to $9,000. Think about that, and think of some of the things that we've heard recently from Washington. It's getting kind of scary. President Biden, as I mentioned, has an empty calendar today. Vice President Harris is in New Hampshire, where she's expected to focus on the economy and small business. Donald Trump is off the trail today, but will likely be active on social media. His running mate, J.D. Vance, will be in Phoenix tomorrow. And again, going back to the beginning, my prayers for the 2 police officers shot in Phoenix last night. One in critical condition, the other apparently going to be okay, thanks to his bulletproof vest. After a huge sell-off to start the new month yesterday, stock markets are still in the red today as Wall Street awaits the big jobs report come Friday. Be sure to keep up with all of the news on Newsmax, N2, and Newsmax.com. Also, make sure you're watching streaming on the new Newsmax Plus. For all of your favorite shows, hosts, guests, documentaries, and more, Rob Schmidt tonight, Greg Kelly Reports, The Record with Greta Van Susteren, Chris Salcedo, Bianca De La Garza, Wake Up America, and more. Newsmaxplus.com. I'm Tony Marino. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Newsmax Daily. Please share it with friends and family. Have a fantastic Wednesday, and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Hey,
it's Jerry Callahan from The Callahan Show. You can listen to us every day. We react to the latest news, politics, sports, and all the madness in the world. I'll give you my opinion with a little edge, a little attitude. I'm an unapologetic right-winger, trapped behind enemy lines in deep blue Boston, so I'm used to taking on the mainstream media mob. You can hear us anywhere you get your podcast, or you can listen every day at newsmax.com/listen.
It's our America. We conquered it. We built it. Great values like honesty and fairness. Great courage. A great nation needs a free press. Newsmax is it. 30 million Americans regularly go to Newsmax when they really need to know. They watch Newsmax TV at home. On the free Newsmax app, they go to newsmax.com.